The 2024 elections were telling. And look, not only did Trump win the popular vote and win every swing state, but he also came close to winning many states that were otherwise thought of as being kind of solid Democrat. Even Florida, for example, used to be a swing state. It's not anymore. I'll be going into this rightward shift today and what's going on with it. And look, this also ties into what we're seeing now with what is kind of a rapid dismantling of the policies of the previous administration, with one of the biggest areas being around gender policies and race politics. And now under Trump's second administration, only 2 genders are recognized in the United States officially. Those are male and female. And surprisingly, this is actually having a big impact on the prison system. Also, Trump's move to take Greenland and Panama Canal, well, it seems to be pretty serious. He seems like he's really set on doing it. And now, interestingly, the Panamanian government has filed a complaint with the United Nations to try to stop the United States from taking the canal. I'll be going to these topics and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, look, first of all, well, a lot happened with the 2024 elections. Many people didn't see it coming. Not only did Trump win the popular vote and win every single swing state, all of them, he also came close to winning many states that used to be solid Democrat. They could become swing states in the upcoming elections. It's possible we could see states like New Jersey become swing states. Even California looks like it's switching. And look, now it's possible even some solid blue states, New York, others, they could shift as well because of people leaving the states. Now look, the Brennan Center for Justice, they released analysis on census data showing how red states, Republicans, could get more seats in the House of Representatives and how blue states, think like California and New York, they could actually lose seats in the House of Representatives because of the populations. Brennan Center for Justice said this: Florida and Texas, 2 states that have become kind of solid red, could see especially large increases of 4 seats each, with Texas within striking distance of adding a 5th seat, maybe 8 to 9 seats in the House of Representatives, meaning that's going to change our political system. And they say, meanwhile, California and New York, which have seen significant population outflows this decade, and maybe even more soon, are projected to lose 4 and 2 districts respectively. For California, this would be only the 2nd time in history it has lost representation. The first was this decade when the Golden State lost 1 seat. Now look, if that actually happens, it would make Republican control of the House of Representatives, meaning part of Congress, basically solid. It'd be very hard for Democrats to overturn that, unless they can overturn like Texas and Florida. And of course, look, deportations of illegal immigrants can also have a huge impact on future census data, depending on how broad the operations end up being. But it's important to note with the mass deportations, this is not necessarily a red state or a blue state issue. Texas and Florida have a lot of illegal immigrants. California and New York have a lot of illegal immigrants. And so it doesn't really divide up like people may think it would. But even without people leaving the states, voters themselves seem to be changing their political opinions. Newsweek said this: the beginning of President Donald Trump's 2nd term has seen his net approval rating reach a historic high, according to Rasmussen reports, with the latest presidential tracking poll showing a net approval of plus 14. This marks a significant milestone for Trump, breaking previous records set during his first term. He's becoming even more popular, and more popular even since he won the election. It says the latest numbers represent a remarkable achievement for Trump, eclipsing his previous net approval high of plus 10, which was recorded twice in 2017, his first term in office, from January 24 to 26 and February 14 to 16. During those periods, Trump garnered 55% approval, but his disapproval rating also stood at 45%, resulting in a smaller net gain compared to current figures, meaning he's more popular now than he ever was. And notes, according to Rasmussen polling, 49% of black voters approve of Trump. That's massive, by the way. 72% of Hispanic voters approve of Trump. That's massive. These used to be solid Democrat voting bases. It says 57% of women also approve and 48% of independent voters. Now look, that is a huge, huge shift. If we take that as being valid and representative across, the board, especially with black voters and Hispanic voters, that's a very big deal. We did start to see their votes shift during the recent elections, but even that was far from what we're seeing now. The black vote went from like 10% Republican to like 20%. That was regarded as big. If it really is now like over 40%, that's even bigger. Although it should be noted, part of that is based on policy issues, not necessarily like they like Trump. It's more like they support the type of policies he's putting in place. But interestingly as well, CNN commented on this. Have a look at this.
Look, the American people really like what they're seeing, at least compared to where Donald Trump started 8 years ago, right? All right, this is Donald Trump's net approval rating. This is Reuters Ipsos. It's among adults. It was taken the first few days of this administration. Look here. Back in January 2017, Donald Trump became the first president in history to start his presidency with a net negative approval rating. Look at where we are now in January 2025. Considerably better at plus 6 points. That's up 9 points. To borrow a Donald Trump phrase, this is big league. This is a sign that the American people, at least initially, like what they're seeing. And so you see right here, more Americans approve of Donald Trump's job than disapprove. And that is very much unlike what we saw 8 years ago.
Now, interestingly, this shift we're watching could also impact individual states. Take New Jersey, for example. New Jersey used to be a solid blue state for Democrats. One of the only areas that's not blue is like Ocean County, where I actually partly grew up at. And now there's talk also that New Jersey could become a swing state in the next election. Town Hall said this. It said President Donald Trump's approval rating is soaring in New Jersey post-election, a state traditionally dominated by Democrats, signaling a shift in political sentiment even in deep blue territory. Despite the state's liberal leanings, recent polls show a surge in support for Trump, mainly as voters grow frustrated with local leadership on issues like crime, homelessness, and high taxes. And it's according to an Emerson College polling, Pix 11, the Hill poll, for the 2025 New Jersey gubernatorial election, Trump's approval rating has unexpectedly risen for the first time, securing a 48% favorable rating among New Jersey voters. It says the president now has a higher favorability rating than the state's Democratic governor, Phil Murphy, meaning Trump is more popular than the Democrat governor. It says 46% of New Jersey voters view Trump unfavorably, while 6% remain neutral. And on the contrary, Murphy has a 44% favorable rating, 42% having an unfavorable rating, and 12% remaining neutral. Meaning things are changing. And look, breaking news, by the way, Donald Trump sent the military to California to turn the water back on. Remember how Trump was saying, Gavin Newsom, turn back on that water. And Gavin Newsom said, there's no such thing. You're spreading conspiracy theories. Trump sent the military to California. Yet last night, actually, he sent the military to California and they turned the water back on, i.e. they stopped, making it so that you can't pull enough water to, again, have enough for the state. They were dumping it into the ocean. That now ended. Trump just overrode the governor there. And look, politically right now we're seeing other things. We're seeing this shift, this cultural shift right now on the culture side, as we mentioned, among online influencers. And of course, by no means is it all of them. You might have seen Selena Gomez, crying on camera, for example, about Trump. But we have seen a lot of Hollywood, for example, start to distance itself from politics. They're saying it is harmful to my career to get involved in politics. I'm going to go act on screen and make movies, right? They're trying to stay clear of the political side because it's too dangerous for them. It damages their credibility. And it's becoming clear that celebrity opinion doesn't carry the same weight it used to. A celebrity does a video telling you how to vote. Half the country says, I never want to see your face again. And look, I think this actually backfired on a lot of them if you look at how some of them are viewed now. It seems that Hollywood is now choosing to just go quiet when it comes to the Trump administration. They don't want to speak out anymore because it's harming the industry, the film industry. And we're also seeing this shift among some politicians. You know, New York has become a focal point of this kind of shift within the political system itself, with Mayor Eric Adams in New York City. The Hill said this: New York City Mayor Eric Adams' relationship with President Trump is alarming Democrats, because Adams is a Democrat. I think he's not becoming Republican, he's still a Democrat, but he's changing his political views. And notes that he questions the embattled mayor's motives amid his ongoing legal challenges. On that point, some people are saying that Mayor Eric Adams is only pretending to like Trump because he wants a pardon. He's currently being criminally investigated. But there's a bit more to this, right? He's facing ongoing criminal charges, but the important part is what led up to that. Before any charges are being discussed, Adams was already changing his stance, meaning his political actions preempted the cases, meaning his actions politically had nothing to do with him getting pardoned. Adams became, one of the big critics of the mass illegal immigration policies for the last few years. He tried challenging the policies. He even tried changing New York law to make it so that New York would not have to give a house to everybody who wants a house, because New York has a right to housing law. And now he's alleging that because he did that, the criminal charges he is now facing are retribution, politicized justice, because he dared to speak out against mass illegal immigration. That's what he says. Now, take it for what you will, that's what he says. But the shift we're now watching is happening elsewhere as well. And with the changes in voters, well, some of them could just be fed up by the negative perceptions from local politicians and the way they're handling things, or maybe not handling things, right? Kind of mismanagement and crime policies, for example. Just about anything else along those lines we're now seeing on partisan grounds. Just as an example, we talked about California, right? The fires in Los Angeles, still ongoing by the way, they could have a huge impact on how people vote in the next election. Now, it's not clear right now how things are going to shake up for California, but it is possible. The ongoing fires in Los Angeles could become a turning point for the state. Donald Trump has been sparring with local politicians over that issue, and while many of them have framed the fires as being the result of global warming, Trump is saying the fires are a result of mismanagement by local officials. New York Post said this: President Trump tangled with Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass Friday after touring wildfire damage in America's second largest city, Los Angeles, demanding she use her emergency powers and allow residents to return to rebuild their homes. It notes that Trump's 78 championed resident complaints about not being allowed to access their own properties to clear debris and begin reconstruction, while blaming local policies for causing the catastrophe estimated to cost $250 billion, which they want federal taxpayers to pay, meaning you and I, no matter what state you live in. And on that point, Trump was also saying that if California wants all that juicy money, well, if they want to rebuild using our tax dollars, well, that state needs to do two things. California needs to put in place voter ID laws, and California needs to change its environmental policies to stop restricting the availability of water. And notably, when California was still not doing it, last night, Trump sent the military to California, and he declared on social media that they turned the water back on. He just bypassed the local officials and did this as a type of emergency order. And look, there are also now movements underway among voters to recall Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, and also Gavin Newsom, but Karen Bass especially. Now, as we've discussed before, the fires, they're not just a disaster for the state, natural or man-made, you decide. The fires are a turning point for a political disaster for California officials. The Daily Mail, they had an exclusive piece noting insider allegations of how damaging the disaster has been politically for the mayor of Los Angeles. And it also notes her past of supporting communists, including in Cuba, And this is becoming controversial yet again. Daily Mail said this. It said the current wildfire disaster is only the latest controversy to damage bass. She praised Fidel Castro and had close associations with Cuba in her youth, traveling to the country in 1973 with an organization called Venceremos Brigade and seeing the communist leaders speak. In 2016, when Castro died, she referred to him as Comandante en Jefe, Commander-in-Chief, saying his passing was a great loss to the people of Cuba. It says she also reportedly gave a eulogy for a senior member of the Communist Party USA. And that's becoming very controversial right now. Now, on the point of California, though, there's also a counter movement. It's not just, going Trump. By no means is that happening, right? There are still plenty of people who really don't like him and people who do side with local politicians. On the other side of the argument in California, some are accusing Donald Trump of trying to politicize the fires. And even with some of the attempts to recall the local officials, remember, there were 2 times where the state tried to recently remove Governor Gavin Newsom. Newsom is still there. The campaigns have not yet worked. They're trying a 3rd time now. But now there's another movement starting in California. There are people right now, and they actually have the clearance to do it. Some people want California to break away from the rest of the country entirely and become its own country. And we might actually see a vote on this. It's actually going through as we speak. Newsweek said this. It said California Secretary of State Shirley Weber has approved a campaign to gather signatures petitioning for a vote on whether the Golden State should leave the U.S. and become an independent country. Calexit, like Brexit or Texit, right? Calexit, a group that campaigns for California independence, described Trump's presidential election win in November as an attack on everything California cares about, some of them, and argued that it strengthened the state's case for secession. They are seceding from the Union, trying to. In 2024, it says the Texas Republican Party included in its policy platform a call for a referendum on the state becoming an independent nation. And, Texas, they're trying to do this as well. I'll get into that in a minute. But notes on Thursday, this just happened, Weber announced that the Independence Petition Initiative for California, which Evans launched from Fresno, could begin collecting signatures. To have an independence vote included on California's 2028 election ballot, campaigners must gather 546,651 signatures, constituting 5% of the votes cast for Governor Gavin Newsom in November 2022, and submit them to county election officials by July 22nd, 2025. That's not a lot. That's not a big threshold to reach. They might reach it. It notes, the question posed by the campaign is this, quote, should California leave the United States and become a free and independent country for the people, right? It says, according to the campaign, if at least 50% of the registered California voters cast their ballots and at least 55% of participants vote yes, it would constitute a vote of no confidence in the United States of America and an expression of the will of the people of California to become an independent state. Now, look, it's not clear whether they can legally do this. Texas is the only other state that's really seriously making that attempt. Texas has floated a similar move to break away from the United States and become its own country, especially when Biden was president. That was a big campaign in Texas. But Texas is unique. Texas has a unique agreement that it made when it joined the American Union that could allow this. Remember, Texas was not part of the U.S. There was a Mexican-American War. Texas became its own country, and Texas decided to join the American Union, but with some requirements. Mainly, if they feel the Constitution is being violated, they can become their own country and just go back to being independent. Texas even has its own military and such. It's a unique state. And so for California to follow that, it's a bit of a gray area, right? Even then, even for Texas, if they tried that, it would still be legally debatable, especially given the fact that the agreement was made before the Civil War. And there were additional measures put in place since the Civil War to prevent the breaking up of the American Union, right? The Republic of the United States. Because remember, the Civil War is basically defined by states wanting to become their own countries and create a confederacy of states rather than a union. But look, on that campaign in California, it has now been cleared by the California Secretary of State, meaning they are probably going to start collecting signatures for it. And locally, the Collexit campaign is officially in place. Now, nationally, we'll have to see whether that works, but on that point, even some Republicans actually support the idea, at least kind of jokingly. Hey, California, go for it, right? Remember, the reason they say that is because if California really did break away and become its own country, that would solidify Republican control over the rest of the United States for the foreseeable future. When it comes to the Senate, when it comes to the House, when it comes to just electoral college votes, Democrats would probably never win another election if California left. Although California also represents a major economic and military hub for the United States, so look, outside of partisan politics, Republican, Democrat, this would be detrimental to the United States and its security, and also deeply controversial. We'll see if it's allowed to move forward. But look, on a similar note, we also see Republicans taking a much stronger line than we've become accustomed to. Now look, it used to be the case. Democrats were always fairly united. They tended to march in lockstep. If one of them said something, the rest echoed it. It's not like that anymore. Republicans used to be the ones more likely to challenge each other. They're always fighting each other. They could control the House and the Senate and then sabotage themselves and get nothing done, like they did in the early part of Trump's first term in office, by the way. Republicans have the tendency to sabotage themselves. Democrats have the tendency to push things too far and then kind of ruin themselves. But look now, we see some Democrats in Congress going the other way. They're becoming more cooperative with Republicans. They're kind of siding with them. They're voting with them. They're breaking ranks. And we're seeing Republicans, interestingly, becoming more in line with each other, more in lockstep, and staying in rank, with some exceptions, of course. But on some key issues, this is becoming more notable. Take mass migration, for example. Just the News said this. It said Senate Republicans have rejected a request from moderate Democrat senators, according to Just the News, for a bipartisan effort on immigration. It says the 12 Democratic senators sent a letter to Senator Majority Leader John Thune suggesting a bipartisan solution on the issue. The letter was signed by swing state senators Mark Kelly of Arizona and Raphael Warnock of Georgia. And they said, quote, "We remain ready to work with you in good faith to craft legislation that can achieve bipartisan support and 60 votes in the Senate," meaning you might be able to pass a law on it, the letter reads. And guess what? Well, Senator Ron Johnson said, he's a Republican, he laughed when he got the letter, according to NBC News, and it said, "That's a letter we will ignore. We're not going to wait for them. If they want to secure the border, they could have done that. That's not what they want." Meaning the idea of a bipartisan solution to the border crisis, it's not going to happen. Republicans have basically said at this point, we see what you want. You want this country flooded with 10 million, 20 million, 30 million illegal immigrants. You want unvetted, unchecked, mass illegal immigration. You want them to come in every part of this area, and you want to ship them and use our money to do it. That's what you want. Republicans, we want to deport all of them. That's what they're saying, at least. And so a middle ground between this, what maybe instead of 10 million people in 4 years, they want 5 million. That's not going to happen. Republicans are saying, you know what, we're in control right now. There's the door. We'll see if that holds up, especially the midterm elections when Democrats could possibly gain more seats, but we'll have to see. Now, part of this, of course, pulls from recent memory. Because why is that? What do Republicans remember? What do Democrats remember? Well, Democrats have been saying Republicans need to not go to extremes right now. They're saying things shift. You know, there's a pendulum in politics. It swings one way, it's going to swing the other way, and you best be careful because once it swings the other way, if you go to extremes, they will too. Now, Republicans basically control all three branches of government right now. Yes, the Supreme Court is technically not Republican or Democrat, but it kind of is. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? But for Republicans, it's still fresh in their minds. And just a few months ago, many of the Democrats were trying to go after them for criminal investigations. Republicans were basically hiding under the floorboards, wondering when they were going to get arrested for, who knows what. They were getting investigated. They were getting charged. Criminals were, of course, running rampant on the streets. Donald Trump almost went to prison for the rest of his life for what many regard as weaponized justice. That was Democrats just a few months ago. And then suddenly Trump wins and they're saying, hey, let's all be friends, buddy, right? It's not likely. Republicans are just going to forget what just happened anytime soon. And they're not going to say, okay, let's find a nice little middle ground because you were so nice to us a few months ago. It's not happening. And on that note also, we're also watching a very rapid dismantling of the policies of the previous administration. Now look, Biden did the same thing to Trump when he came into office. When Biden first came to office, 2020, 2021, right? Biden also signed an order, got rid of most of Trump's policies, very rapidly put his agenda in place. Trump's now doing that to Biden. And one of the biggest issues is gender politics and also race politics, but gender in particular. Folks, now officially in the United States, American law, American definitions, this is what it is. There are only two genders. There is male and there is female. And you are assigned that at birth with whatever God gave you. And the reality of this new policy, well, it just hit the prison system. No questions asked. And you're going to get sent back to the one you really belong in, even if you say you're something else. I'll be talking more about this and what's happening after we come back from a quick break. We'll be back in less than a minute, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. President Donald Trump is back in office and he hit the ground running, folks. As we see it right now, shortly after being sworn in, Donald Trump's first move, the very first thing he did, was he signed an order to end 78 different policies of the Biden administration. He just got rid of all of it, right? And just a week into his administration, we're like, a week and 2 days now. We've also watched the dismantling of the environmental policies, the race politics, and all the gender politics that was running rampant in this country. For example, only 2 genders are now officially recognized in the United States. There's no 78 genders or whatever it was now. There's no trans flags hanging on American government buildings. That is now forbidden with a lot of them. There is now only male and female. You are a man or you are a woman, or a boy or a girl if you're younger. And this is what the official order actually says, signed by Donald Trump on his first day in office. He got sworn in. He went and signed this in front of a live audience. White House said this. It said, "It is the policy of the United States to recognize 2 sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable. You can't just change whatever you want, and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. Under my direction," Donald Trump saying this, "the executive branch will enforce all sex protective laws to promote this reality, and the following definitions shall govern all executive interpretations of and application of federal law and administration policy." And after saying that, the order then goes on to define what is a man And what is a woman? An adult human male, an adult human female. And to define sex and gender ideology basically is saying that, well, you can't just say you are whatever you want. You can imagine you're something else. You are not that thing. You are what you were born with, and there's no changing that. You can cut it off. You can do whatever you want. That doesn't make you a different gender. Basically, things are back to the way they were before any of this whole trans stuff was even something we could even possibly imagine. You would not dream of it. We're back to that stage, right? And the reality of this new policy, well, it is now dawning on the country, and in particular, the prison system. And apparently there were a lot of male prisoners who identified as female and were able to go to female prisons and vice versa, right? And now these prisoners are having to return to the prisons of the gender they were assigned to at birth. Breitbart said this: the approximately 1,500 male federal prisoners who identify as women will now be sent to men's facilities in the wake of President Trump's executive order establishing single-sex prisons. By the way, Trump's order defined this as protecting women because some of these male prisoners go to the female prisons and then rape the female prisoners. And it's President Trump's executive order titled, quote, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, also ends transgender-related medical procedures for prison inmates, which we were paying for with our tax dollars, by the way. And notes the Women's Liberation Front, by no means a conservative group. This is a feminist organization, it says, that advocates for single-sex prisons and raises awareness about incarcerated women becoming victims of male violence because men are being sent to women's prisons, called President Trump's move, quote, a major victory. Not a conservative group praising Trump on this. It notes the bizarre practice of housing prisoners in facilities that do not correspond with their biological sex is a relatively new phenomenon in American society, having first been implemented at the end of the Obama administration. We can thank Barack Obama for this. Thanks, Obama. The Obama-era guidelines that allowed transgender inmates to be held in facilities based on their identity was later revised under President Trump's first term to require housing that corresponded with a prisoner's biological sex. So there were some changes to that, but not enough apparently for Trump. Now, look, we're also seeing a new trend as well. It seems that all those policies on race, all those policies on gender, and anything else tied to any of that, whether it's the entire ESG system or the entire DEI system, are now becoming a type of identifier. Because, look, the policies, those things, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Do you believe in the global warming or whatever? And, you should alter our entire way of life to solve it. Where people stood on those issues over the last 4 years is now becoming a little badge they wear on their chest, right? It's something that signifies where they stand politically. And now their histories on that are being used to determine where do they actually stand. And it seems that the Trump administration is now using that history to see who they should work with and who they should avoid, right? And we just saw one example of this with the Director of National Intelligence. The post-millennial said this. It said, President Donald Trump has replaced Acting Director of National Intelligence Stacey Dixon after it was rumored she was attempting to derail Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to Director of National Intelligence, allegedly working against her within the administration. According to New York Times, a senior Trump official said that Dixon was asked to go so that Trump could name someone, quote, who aligns with his priorities. And Dixon, it notes, had reportedly also been aligned with DEI initiatives from the Biden administration, suggesting she was not somebody who aligns with Trump's ideas, at least on that. It notes as well, allies of Trump told the outlet that Dixon had been too involved in the DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, from the Biden administration, which made diversifying the intelligence agencies a priority. Meaning, of course, not hiring people based on skill. You're not hiring them because they're smart or talented or because they work hard. You're hiring them because they identify as something. or because of the color of their skin. And note she was also appointed by the Biden administration to serve as the principal deputy director of national intelligence in 2021. Now look, on that point, we don't really know fully what the reasons were for her being removed. There are claims on both sides of the aisle, right? Democrats say she was fired because she was acting against Tulsi Gabbard. Republicans say she was let go because she supported DEI initiatives. And because she supported these things in the past, it became an identifier where Trump believed that maybe she was working against him as well. But regardless of which side is true, we are seeing public criticism of just about every individual and their past actions, because now we know, where did everybody stand on these issues? Remember, under the previous administration, you had to speak your, ideas, whatever, right? You had to come out and declare, do you align with these ideas? Do you support DEI? Are you an ally or are you an enemy, right? That was the whole narrative. And now everybody who said, I'm an ally, and said they agree with these things, well, people now know. People say, you were one of those people trying to throw me in prison last time around, and I don't think I want to work with you this time, right? And that's where things are now. Now, look, interestingly as well, folks, speaking of, let's call it divisive issues, it seems like Trump is actually serious about taking Greenland. He is not joking. Many people thought he was joking. I thought he was joking, but he actually seems very serious. So serious, in fact, that Denmark is actually scared of him. This was reportedly conveyed during a call that Trump had with Denmark's prime minister. This is what the Financial Times had on that call between them, allegedly. Financial Times said this: Donald Trump insisted he was serious in his determination to take over Greenland in a fiery telephone call with Denmark's prime minister, according to a senior European official, or several of them. It says the U.S. president spoke to Mette Frederiksen, the Danish premier, for 45 minutes last week, just after coming into office, right? It says the White House was not commented on the call, but Frederiksen said she had emphasized that the vast Arctic island, Greenland, an autonomous part of the Kingdom of Denmark, was not for sale, while noting America's big interest in it, right? Now, this is what they said, quote, "It was horrendous," said one of the people. Another added, quote, "He was very firm. It was a cold shower. Before it was very hard to take it seriously, but I do think it is serious and potentially very dangerous." Another said, quote, "The intent was very clear. They want it," meaning Greenland. It says the Danes are now in crisis mode, said one person briefed on the call. And another said this, quote, "The Danes are utterly freaked out by this." And notes a former Danish official added, quote, "It was a very tough conversation. He threatened specific measures against Denmark, such as targeted tariffs," which he was talking about even prior to this, by the way, saying, you don't want to sell it to us, we're going to hit you with tariffs so hard you'll never do business again, right? And notes the Danish Prime Minister's office said it did not recognize the interpretation of the conversation given by anonymous sources, suggesting, of course, that this is media just blowing things out of proportion, exaggerating, maybe even making things up. We don't know, right? But it does seem that Trump is very serious about taking Greenland. He wants to buy it or maybe make it a U.S. colony. I don't know what he's planning. But Trump is threatening to put tariffs on Denmark, and Denmark is suddenly having more attention than probably more attention they've gotten since the end of the Viking Age, right? Since about 1100 AD. They've never had this much attention since then. And look, it's actually not just Greenland Trump wants. He's also very serious about possibly having the United States retake control of the Panama Canal. He's serious about it. And the Panamanian government is not very happy about this. Panama filed a complaint with the United Nations to try and stop this. And we can assume the United Nations is going to angrily approach Trump about this. France 24 said, in a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the government in Panama City referred to an article of the UN Charter precluding any member from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of another. The missive distributed to reporters Tuesday urges Guterres to refer the matter to the UN Security Council, like maybe China and Russia, because they're on these councils sometimes, without asking for a meeting to be convened. And notes Trump, in his inaugural address Monday, repeated his complaint that China was effectively operating the Panama Canal through its growing presence around the waterway, which the United States handed over at the end of 1999. And he said, quote, "We didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back," Trump said. Now look, there's actually a strong point on that. The U.S. agreement on handing the canal over to Panama did include language that would allow the United States to retake control over it if the sovereignty of the canal is under threat. And Panama, their huge cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party, their love of CCP money, and all the various projects around the canal from the Chinese Communist Party, well, all of that could represent a violation of their agreement with the United States. And Trump could say, well, look, you're the ones violating the agreement. You're blocking us. If we retake it, you're the ones in violation of the UN Charter. He could actually say that. We'll see. And look, we'll see how all this goes as well. In addition to taking back the Panama Canal and possibly having the United States acquire Greenland, Trump has also joked about making Canada the 51st state of the United States. And there's a Canada is not for sale meme going around in Canada right now. We'll see how long that lasts. Right now, many of us think he's joking about that. Ha, 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 Governor of Canada, Justin Trudeau. But who knows, folks? Hey, look, maybe if California secedes from the Union, that Canada can fill the spot. And then we don't have to add a new star to the flag, right? It makes it easier. All right, folks. That said, hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's jump into some questions. And by the way, there's so much breaking news going on. I'm struggling to keep up with it. All right, folks, last night, I mentioned this briefly. Late night, it was like 1 a.m., I think I saw it. Donald Trump sent the U.S. military to California and had them, quote unquote, turn the water back on. And this is going to be politically detrimental to California because Governor Gavin Newsom was saying, we never turned the water off, right? The actual argument, of course, being they were limiting the amount of water that you could pull out of one of their main waterways, and they were just dumping it into the ocean to protect a little fish, right? And other environmental policies were standing in the way. Trump just ended that. And also, I'm going to go into this probably tomorrow, so I'll just mention it in passing because it's big breaking news. Trump had a phone call with the president of El Salvador. And you might have seen the pictures of the people in El Salvador, the MS-13 gang members in their underwear, laying against each other's backs, and they look like they're in you know, like a terrorist prison camp, right? It looks like they're in Guantanamo Bay or something like that. El Salvador has begun a very tough on crime policy, and Trump declared that if illegal immigrants, criminal ones, continue to enter the United States after being deported, that he will begin looking to a third country option. Meaning, if you have these criminal illegal aliens like Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or people who drink and drive all the time or rapists or whatever else, the people they're deporting right now, that rather than sending them back to Venezuela or Honduras or Mexico, Trump is talking about sending them to El Salvador and having them treated like those MS-13 gang members. He had a phone call with the president of El Salvador yesterday on this. We'll be talking more about this, folks, because I want to do a bit more on it. That said, let's jump into some questions. TMAs, you're saying, let's make a deal. Trade California for Greenland. That's a pretty tempting deal. You know, militarily, that's a pretty good deal. You know, we could hypothetically move the U.S. military presence to like Oregon or maybe Washington, or we could put stuff even on the southern parts of the southern parts of Alaska, because it actually goes very far down the western coast of Canada. We have all of it actually, right? That'd be an interesting idea. I think some people might support that. I would actually say too, I was thinking about like, okay, what's the population of California? What's the population of Canada? If we made Canada like the 51st state, would that kind of maintain the same balance if we lost California? Because we would expect, we'd expect Canada to like kind of vote like California, right? Honestly, they'd probably vote like California. And so how would that affect our political system? Maybe that would be an interesting trade-off as well. Something to consider, right? Let's see. Geoff Christensen, you're saying, before this gender executive order, shouldn't it have been impossible to discriminate based on gender, since they claim that gender is changeable rather than an immutable characteristic? Yeah. Well, Geoff Christensen, that's a little too high IQ for some of these people. Let's be honest. Let me explain. Did you watch that the documentary with Matt Walsh, What is a Woman? I thought he did a pretty good job on it, but he actually brings up a point on that, where he's talking to these people about gender politics, and he's like, well, what is a woman? And they're like, well, a woman is whatever you say it is. A woman is whatever you want it to be. And he's like, well, if you're saying that a man can transition into a woman, then how do you define what he's transitioning into? If a woman identifies as a woman, and she's always been a woman, is she different from a trans person? Does she have different rights? Why is it that being trans grants you additional rights if you were already a woman because of interpretation? Folks, this may come as a surprise. I identify as a man. I identify as a man. And since I identify as a man, does that mean that I get all those protections that would be garnered to people who, change their identities because I've always identified as such? If they say that no, because you're cisgender, you go by the, label given at birth, well, so what? It's my identity. Does that change anything? If they try to start changing these definitions, it brings up the question, well, what is a man and what is a woman? If you're saying there is a hard definition of what you can become, but you're also saying that there is no definition, this logic does not align with itself, right? There's no logic here. This doesn't align, right? It doesn't work that way. I debated telling you all this story, but I'm going to tell it because I'm in a good mood. So I've mentioned before, I have family members who are in the police department, and the sheriff's department. I have a lot of friends there. In fact, I know some sheriff's offices. We have a lot of viewers because my family and stuff, and they there's other people in the department who watch the show. I'll tell you a story. I won't tell you where this happened, but I'll tell you a story. So some of the sheriff's offices in some states, they're required to have like the ACLU come in and give like DEI classes, right? The police officers have to sit through this. And imagine you're a police officer, you just did a case where you saw a crack addict, try to stab somebody with a shovel. And you have to go and sit in this class, and you're watching this man dressed as a woman trying to lecture you about gender politics. And you're like, oh my gosh, right? And remember too, a lot of police officers, they deal with some crazy stuff. Technically, a lot of them, they actually, it's not funny, but a lot of them suffer from real bad PTSD. The things they witness on a regular basis are actually kind of similar to what troops would have encountered in war. Remember, some troops never even saw combat, right? But they still deal with a lot. They deal with a lot. So they tend to have kind of like dark humor, and they tend to have a way of kind of coping with, the problems they face by laughing with each other and kind of making jokes about things. So the sergeant in this office, he knows how his guys are, right? And so he's like, guys, please do me a favor. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Just do me a good one here. Sit at that desk. listen to this person and don't say a single word. Please, please, I beg you, right? And they're like, all right, Sarge, fine. So they're sitting there, and this guy dressed as a woman is talking to them about like gender identity. Finally, they have this one sheriff's deputy, right? And this guy's like, you know, like New Yorker. He's like, you know, 2 years out from retiring. He goes, at the end of it, he goes, man, finally. He goes, I'm so glad you're here and told me this, because my whole life, he goes, my whole life, I've been a lesbian trapped in a man's body, right? And this man dressed as a woman just kind of like looks at him. And the sergeant, right? The sergeant who begged them to not say a word, he just goes like this, like just puts his head down. You know, it was just too much for him. You know what I mean? Anyways, right? But if you identify and everything you identify as is valid, that guy was totally right. He was totally right in saying that, right? There was nothing wrong with that if that was his identity. Who's to say? Or who can question it, right? All right, let's see here. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, no, California, you cannot be another country. We fought a war over that 160 approximately years ago. That's right, we won California fair and square, right? We won California fair and square. Same with Texas. And look, I know on that point as well, I'm talking about the Mexican-American War. The technicality with that, because I don't know if you've seen lately, the president of Mexico, she's wearing a hat saying, "Make America Mexico Again." In Mexico, a lot of people say that, oh, you know, America stole the Western states. We kind of stole it from Spain, right? Kind of. But there's a bit more to it. We didn't steal it from Mexico. Mexico at the time was part of the Spanish Empire. And Texas had an agreement with the Spanish Empire to basically self-govern, right? There was nothing there. They went there, they built their country, and they had an agreement with them. Then there was a revolution in Mexico, actually kind of a communist-ish revolution in Mexico, which, you know, at the time was a rising ideology. You had a dictator, Santa Anna, come about, a military dictator, and Santa Anna fought with the Spanish government, and Santa Anna won, and then declared that Texas belonged to the New Mexico, and Texas said, we're not part of you. We were under the Spanish government, not you. I don't know who you are. And of course, they went to war. And then Texas asked the United States to intervene in that war. The United States got involved, beat back the New Mexican government, not the Spanish government. And those Western states were under Spain, not Santa Anna, beat them back. And then America acquired California and, of course, Texas and a few other spots as well. Technically, that was as valid as the existence of Canada. Because remember, Canada used to be under the British Empire, just like the North American, just like North America, just like the United States as we know it now. Canada was also under the British Empire. There was the Indian Wars, we call them, was actually a war between the United States, between technically the British United States and French Canada, because Canada was under the French. We call it the Indian War because the French had made allies with a lot of Indian tribes, and while fighting the French, we were also fighting a lot of Indian tribes. The American founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence actually noted that, we're tired of getting dragged into the wars of Europe. Every time Britain goes to war with France, the American people need to go to war with the French and Canada. Every time the British go to war with Spain, we have to go to war with, Spain and Mexico and, the Western states. And we're tired of it. That was part of the Declaration of Independence, right? What ended up happening? Well, the United States technically beat the French in Canada. And Canada became part of the same country, of the United States. It wasn't the United States yet, it was just the British, it was the British colonies, right? The American Revolution starts, America beats back the British. We fight them off, they go back to their homeland, and they go to Canada. And technically, Canada remained under that same agreement. They're under the British Commonwealth, right? The validity of Texas and California and so on being under the United States is under the same valid grounds as Canada being its own country. Because again, it relates to a civil war, and we did not conquer all of Canada. The Mexican government in their civil war against Spain did not conquer all of the United States or even Texas, right? And that's how it is. And so that's kind of the technicality with it there, right? But on your point, Martin, about California not becoming its own country. Yeah, I mean, honestly, jokes aside, I think it would be terrible if California broke off from the United States. Like I'm from San Diego, born and raised until I traveled a lot afterwards, but until I was about 12 years old, that was everywhere I was. There's a lot of military bases there. San Diego's, it's tons of military stuff. I remember my grandfather was, he's a Marine officer, retired. I remember going to the military base with him growing up to go to the store to buy his cigarettes and stuff like that, because they don't pay. They have on the bases stores we don't pay like sales tax and stuff. And so, on that point, it would be terrible if we lost California. Strategically, militarily, it's extremely important. America could not afford to lose California. So even though they're talking about it, I don't think it's going to happen. Eileen Weinger, you're saying, people in the chat, please stop hating on California. Yeah, you tell them, Eileen, I'm a Californian. Right? I'm a Californian, folks. Eileen's saying, I know we need a lot of reform for there. There's a lot of great patriots in California. And by the time most of your nation's farmers, by the way, most of your nation's farmers are still in California, so please show some faith for California reform. That is correct. As a native Californian, I will defend the honor of California. Really, if you look at the latest election results as well, most of California is not as far left as it's framed as, especially basically outside of like Los Angeles and San Francisco and maybe like Sacramento. A lot of the state is pretty conservative, and I would say even a lot of moderate areas. Where I grew up at, we had I later moved to Santee, and then I went to school in like East County for a while, right? We had like rodeos and stuff out there. You still have full-on cowboy culture in parts of California. I grew up like surfing and riding dune buggies and a bit of horseback riding and riding quads and dirt bikes and stuff. Like that's California in my mind. And where I grew up at was fantastic. Yeah, flying squirrels down in Orange County is still red, as is most of California. Look at a map of California. If you go outside not even the big cities, even San Diego is kind of purple right now. And most of that's because it's military, and a lot of the military votes count as out of state, by the way. But I really just basically outside of like Los Angeles and San Francisco, it's pretty much like the rest of the country actually. And California is a beautiful state. It's really a pity the way it's gone with, I would say, look, partisan politics aside, it's a pity the way it's gone with high taxes and really bad management. And I mean, there's a difference between like left-wing politics and like communist politics. And I think unfortunately, they've gone to the extreme of having just straight up communist politics in some areas, which is really hurting the people there. Most of my family cannot stand it. In fact, I know very few people who like what has been happening there, no matter where they stand. A lot of Californians are really fed up with the politics. And so even though you see the stuff on the surface, it's not really like that. It's really not like that. I have a big family. My grandma had like 11 brothers and sisters. Hey, she was Filipino Hawaiian, right? Give her a break. And most of my family, their political views are similar to mine. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of people I know. Mockingjay, you're saying, does this mean the education system can no longer force teachers to take DEI courses to have their credentials recertified? I don't think we're there yet, but I do think there will be challenges on it. You know, part of the problem with the teaching system is the teachers' unions. Remember, during his first term in office, Trump made it so that teachers are not mandated to join the teachers' union. And by eliminating the mandate, that was, of course, changing, the culture of the teachers, first off, but also making it so the teachers' unions were not as powerful. Because it's one thing when you have, like, basically your teacher union dictator sitting on top of the throne and every subject has to join it. Meaning that even if you don't agree with the politics of the union, you are forced to be part of it, and your presence is used to establish its power, right? Trump brought an end to that during his first term in office. Biden brought it back. We'll see if Trump does anything on that. He is not yet there. The unions are a whole other issue. But when it comes to the trainings they have to take, the DEI stuff, as things currently stand, DEI is on its way out, but only technically, legally within the federal government and the federal system of, like, what gets money. So, you could say the public schools themselves do it, but the teacher union would be kind of separate from that. And I don't know if this would affect the credentialing process. I don't think that's federal, right? Or is it maybe? And so there's kind of a different body that Trump would have to go after with it. On that front, with ESG and DEI, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the private sector is also facing challenges more from the legal side, because some people are saying that these policies are discriminatory. They are demonizing white people. They demonize Asians. They demonize people based on your gender identity. If you're like me and you were born a male and you identify as a male, you're going to be discriminated against. If you're a woman and you identify as a woman, you might be discriminated against, right? Because they kind of weigh things based on identity. What California may face, even if they don't immediately reform this, and the teachers' unions, what they may face, is they may face lawsuits. And that will probably be the first stage with it. You will see people probably suing them if they believe they're being discriminated against. And then there's also the possibility Trump could take action on it. Remember, folks, we're only like a week into, we're a week into 4 years. And by the way, they're trying to make some reforms to have Trump run for a third term in office. There is a bill that has been proposed to allow the president to run for a third term. Maybe it could be 8 more years if that goes through, although Trump's getting kind of old, so we'll see. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for being here. I always enjoy talking with you all. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And I will see you then. In the meantime, please share this video, like this video, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.